Hello, everybody, and welcome to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined again by John Kell, Tom Pickup, and Sam Rogers from Radio 007 and everyone else from the Bond stuff to not talk about James Bond. We are here to talk about Hook in the latest entry of the Steven Spielberg Retrospective, a film I'm very excited to talk about, and a film I'm actually really excited to speak to all of you guys about as well, because this chat today has been in the planning for a fair few months. I'll get into some of the behind the scenes with that if there is much of it at all. But before we do, as this is an entry in Steven Spielberg Retrospective, please do comment all your thoughts on Hook. Obviously, the film's been out for 30 plus years now, so I'm not going to sit here and say don't spoil it. Of course, please like the video, share it, and if you're a fan of Spielberg, hit the subscribe button. There's a lot more stuff on the way. Every Tuesday, the Steven Spielberg Retrospective has another episode. Next week's Jurassic Park, I'm just going to say it now. So obviously, that's going to be a big one. And if you are new to us, go find us on our social medias. We're now on Instagram, which we're still figuring out how to use, which is Twitter and Instagram at cinema_savvy, Letterboxd and Facebook.com/cinema-savvy, and we have a link to our Redbubble store in the description below. But as I mentioned, we are here to talk about Hook. And before I actually get into that, I'm doing this thing across the series where every time someone new come on, we put them on the spot of a question. Now, all three of you, this is the first time you've been on the Spielberg show. So if we go in the order of John, Sam, Tom, just as a round table, what I'm kind of asking everybody is if you can remember the first Spielberg film you saw, or like your early memories with his films, maybe, because everyone's had different stories, which has kind of made it really fun to find out.
So my first memory of Spielberg film is Hook, and I watched it on Christmas Eve. My brother had broke his arm and was at hospital, and we were sent round to my mum's friends, and they just had this in the the video selection. And I was into Peter Pan. I loved the Disney film at the time, so we just put this on, and it just flew by. I absolutely loved this film the first time I saw it. Asked for it for Christmas, even though Christmas was the next day. Didn't get it for Christmas, but I got it in the new year, and haven't looked back with this film at all. I understand it's the best Spielberg film if you're looking at it on, objectively even, but it holds a dear place in my heart. And as I've got older and I've watched it and stuff, there's so much in it that I think is brilliant and very, very underrated. And I'm really looking forward to talking about it today.
Yeah, for me, I don't remember the first one exactly, but I know as a kid we had Jurassic Park, The Lost World on video, and we had Hook tapes off the TV that I presume my dad would have recorded. Although I messaged my sister yesterday because I just asked, "Oh, is there anything that you can remember?" And she said, because I know we eventually got it on DVD, but she said that it was taped off the TV, and it was probably from around Christmas that it was on, but that the first part was cut off. I think it started maybe partway through the play or at the very end of the play, because I remember we definitely got the baseball scene on the video, but I never saw the TriStar logo at the beginning or the actual title Hook until we got the DVD. So it was really Hook and the Jurassic Park films that, really got me into enjoying Spielberg. And I think it's what my dad enjoyed, because we eventually got, AI, and we used to watch the Indiana Jones films when they were on telly. So yeah, quite a few films when I was younger.
I think it's quite difficult, because when you're a kid, you don't really know who the director is and things like that. But Spielberg's probably one of the first people that must have been introduced to me as someone behind the camera who you'd never seen. You obviously often saw him in interviews when the films were coming out. But I think probably the first one that I'd say was I know John's sort of childhood magical Spielberg film is this, but mine probably was E.T. I think we had it on video at the time, recorded off the television. And that was the first one that I sort of probably realised that, hang on, this is more than a film. There is something magical about this, and I can tell that this is a certain filmmaker, and that carries through to Hook. I really do think that. I mean, it kind of, even the films that he's sort of involved with in the background, obviously the Star Wars films, it's all linked. Those sort of films as well, and the George Lucas crossover. I often really sort of found that those two are the main. I know they're the two biggest names in cinema, probably, aren't they? But they're the two names that I grew up with as filmmakers, and the two that I recognised. But yeah, I think we had. I mean, I saw Hook at the cinema. That's probably the first one I saw at the cinema of his films. In fact, no, it was Last Crusade. Actually, it was Last Crusade, and I mean, those two for me are amongst my favourite ever films now. And then, of course, Jurassic Park came out, and by then I knew quite a lot more about films and appreciated the filmmaking. So I've probably seen most of his films at the cinema from Last Crusade onwards, I think. But yeah, E.T. was probably the first one that I remember being him.
Very envious of anyone that's seen an Indiana Jones film in the cinema. I keep saying that, but one day maybe they'll release them next year. Who knows? I hope so. But yeah, it's quite interesting because again, everyone's got different experiences. They've got different backgrounds with him, and kind of what you said there, Tom. That I feel that as a kid growing up, certainly everyone knew one of Lucas or Spielberg or both, even if you didn't know what a director was. Like to me, George Lucas was that guy on my Star Wars videos before the film started, because there was always things like that on them. And obviously you have to rewind VHSs. The kids of today will never know. They have the luxury of DVDs and Blu-rays and probably streaming now where they don't even have to put a disc in. But yeah, VHSs. I've got this on VHS, and that's going to actually move into the next point. So what I always ask is if everyone's got memories of this film. Obviously, John, your memory was also the sort of first Spielberg film, which is quite exciting. What I kind of want to jump into mine is that on the first episode, when we were doing the questions, I said War of the Worlds is the first Spielberg film I saw. Whereas technically that's wrong because it is this. So I had this on VHS as a kid, and I never had it on DVD, which means I haven't seen this film until yesterday in, I think, about 15, 16 years.
Wow.
I don't know how. Maybe it's been on TV in those years. I've never seen it, but I had distinct memories as a kid watching it. And before everyone came on, we were chatting, and I said that I don't ever remember the play or the baseball scene or anything pre-going to Neverland. I don't remember the final scenes after Neverland. I just have distinct memories of Neverland. So I'm wondering, as a kid, did I just rewind it to when Neverland started, or did I just not know the other stuff? Because that's what I always found fascinating with VHS is you'd like pick where to start it sometimes if you weren't going to the beginning. But so watching this the first time in all that time, and I was actually saying it's like as a kid I enjoyed it. I saw this before I saw Peter Pan, which I think is a really interesting dynamic as well, because I think what that shows is even though I hadn't seen Peter Pan, I knew the story of Peter Pan. You still knew who they were, who Captain Hook was, and all of that sort of stuff, which made it quite interesting. But just kind of wondering what's everyone else's like memories with this, like impact them up had on you when you were being younger. It's quite a fascinating one, I think, for Hook because it's generational.
I think, firstly, I think there's an element of this film. I mean, I had the video from the start and I watched it all the way through. But even though I watched it all the way through, there is a feeling that you're just waiting till you get to Neverland. So even if, and I quite like the first bits, but there is a waiting that now we're getting going. Now we're in Neverland with that. So I do sympathise with that. For me, it's the pop culture references of this film and the quotes that have been embedded into my life from a very, very young age. So Rufio, the amount of times I've shouted that, the amount of times that when I wake up in the morning and I've looked in the mirror and I've got bedhead and I just stupidly go, Mr. Skunkhead with too much hair mousse and all this kind of thing. Football, obviously. But I was just saying before, like, there's just vivid memories I have of this film. So one of the things is I was saying to you guys before about when Bob Hoskins as Smee and his Cockney voice goes, "We're gonna make a little buggers love you." And I remember turning to my mum as a 5-year-old boy, going, "Mummy, what's a bugger?" And these kind of things, and my mum having to like tell me to never say that word again, and those kind of things. And I just, this film has that impact on me, and it always had a magic to it, and the magic to it for me is the John Williams score, which I'm sure that we'll be going into later. I adore this film, and I grew up, I think because I'm that age, because I'm like, I don't know, I'm born late 80s, so when I got to secondary school, pretty much all my school friends, they all had the same childhood film as well. So, like, if anyone shouted Rufio, you just wait for the next one to go Rufio, 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 and it was like it became a chorus piece. So I was surrounded by enablers basically who encouraged my Hook obsession. So it was great.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, I think a lot of people, even if they've not seen a film or whatever else, they're aware of the Peter Pan story, or at least like what the genesis of it and what that is. And when I was a kid, we had Hook, we had the Disney Peter Pan video, and then I also had this brilliant, brilliantly illustrated book that had a Dawn French audio cassette with it. So I used to read that as well. So I had like all these like things with it, and then a few years after, from initial memories, they had the Return to Neverland sequel to the Disney Peter Pan, which I watched a lot as well. And then there was the Peter Pan one with Jason Isaacs, that film as well. So, I mean, there was a lot of, even though I could never say that Peter Pan was my favorite story or anything like that, there was so many like iterations of it at such an early age for me. And that it was just something that was always there. And I think it was more of kind of a comfort thing, if necessary. But yeah, I think with this film, it's a really interesting one because it is such a different take. Like so many times they've done a very similar type of thing. And what I appreciate about the one that was I think it was 2004, the one with Jason Isaacs, is that they were at least doing it as kind of a period piece and doing it like that. Whereas, with Hook, they're very much aware of, okay, if we're doing this, we need to kind of put it into contemporary time, yet do so in a way where by the time you are, going into the memories and flashbacks, essentially, you are seeing it just back then. You see with, when Peter's a baby and you've got, his mother. I know we'll probably go into these scenes later, but his mother, and you can see that it's Victorian dress and styles. So it shows how far he's back. And to me, that was always so interesting because it's like, how do you get from that to here? And, fun fact, which I only just found out. I mean, it's not probably a fun fact for anyone else, but Peter's mother's played by Kelly Rowan, who was the mum in The OC. And to me, that like shocks me because I used to watch The OC a lot when I was younger. So the fact that she's in there as well was just kind of like, whoa. But no, John said there is a magic with the film. And even though I think nowadays a lot of people either aren't aware of it, I don't think it's shown on, main television channels much anymore. I think it still deserves a lot of praise because there's so much that it does right. And I will say, for anyone watching who wants to see this, it does leave UK Netflix at the end of June. So if you have a chance, watch it before then, if you haven't seen it already.
I think I was first aware of it seeing it at the cinema, and it was very much massive at the time. It was very much known that it was a Spielberg film. It was very much known that it was a Robin Williams film, who was massive. I mean, and there weren't many sort of, apart from, I mean, action heroes like Stallone and Schwarzenegger, they're a bit too adult for us. So Robin Williams is someone who, every film I've seen him in is really interesting. I mean, I know we'll get onto it. Perhaps this isn't, at times he's quite dark, isn't he, in a lot of this film? But I think I saw it at the cinema maybe twice, and I saw it again. I think it was on Spring Harvest, John. It's like a sort of Christian holiday where maybe 1 or 2 years after the film had come out. This was at is it Butlins? I think it was Butlins, yeah.
Yeah, it was.
And they showed it. Like they show old films maybe 1 or 2 years after they've been at the cinema, and I couldn't believe it because then it hadn't been on TV since. It's I can't believe I get to see this film again, and I think we recorded it off TV, but weirdly, why is it not sort of seen as a really Christmassy film? It's sort of, yes, you can watch it any time because it is magical, but I consider it a very Christmassy film, and I don't really know why it hasn't become a pop culture thing. The whole Die Hard has now come into that conversation at Christmas. For me, this Hook is one of the most Christmassy films you could get. And I think that's where it needs to come back. But yeah, I think I saw it a few times on the video, and then I hadn't seen it for ages until I realized it was on Netflix. And Jennifer, my wife, hadn't seen it, and I was like, I just couldn't believe she hadn't seen it because it wasn't I don't know. I don't know how big it was. It was big at the time, but for some reason, it's not had that pop culture momentum that some of his other films have had. And I remember there was a joke. Has anyone seen Dennis Pennis? Again, Paul. Right. So look him up. He's got Paul Kay. Actually, he's an actor now. He's a straight actor. He's in loads of things. He was in Afterlife as his therapist, and he used to do a comedy character called Dennis Pennis, and he basically used to go up to celebrities and embarrass them. So he went up to Spielberg once, and he said something like, "I think there'd been a fight recently where Mike Tyson had been knocked out, a surprise," and he was like, Are you friends with Mike Tyson, Stephen? He's like, "Oh no, I don't really know him." Or something. I'm getting this wrong, but because neither of you could come up with the people that neither of you could come up with the hug that people wanted to see. Like that. And I remember thinking, hang on, does that mean Hook wasn't that popular? And I couldn't believe it, or people didn't like it. And I really, obviously you look up stuff and you think, no, it wasn't perhaps as well received as it was. But like you, John, I've never. There wasn't a film, was there, of Peter Pan, a live action? There was just the Disney one with the fox, the animated one, and it doesn't really count for me. So I don't think I'd read the book. So this was like my first introduction into the story, and I'm also obsessed with Michael Jackson, and he's absolutely obsessed with Peter Pan, and it's that idea of becoming a kid again, isn't it, and revisiting your childhood. And I know you might get into it later, George, that he was considered, wasn't he, by Spielberg for the part. So, yes, there you go.
There's a few names. I don't know if anyone would have seen all of them, but I'll bring them up. But certainly there could have been one incredible other Captain Hook. Not that I don't love Dustin Hoffman anyway. But what we'll do, we'll get into film because it's fascinating what he said about finding out that people might have liked it. Because me and Sam spoke a little bit yesterday, didn't we, about that? Mm-hmm. And it's that Star Wars comparison that George Lucas said that no one hated the prequels until they found the internet. And I think it was so major. I was like, hold on. Not everyone worshipped Star Wars 1, 2, and 3. Like growing up on the playground, like they were the films to see. They were what was popular and what everyone else playing them was popular. And it's really fascinating. Some of these films that maybe you grew up with or you've got this attachment to, and finding out people disliked it. And I think it's gonna be a really good conversation later about this one actually, because I think a lot of it is like this probably an expectation of having Peter Pan and finding out it wasn't a typical Peter Pan. But we'll get to that. But as we always kickstart these, we're going to go over the IMDb plot synopsis because in case you've not seen Hook and you've been with us the first 18 minutes, the story for this, because sometimes they give you like 3 words, sometimes they give you a full paragraph, which is unnecessary. Like Indiana Jones last week, they had everyone's full character names, including their nicknames in the description, which is not needed. But this one is quite simple. When Captain James Hook kidnaps his children, an adult Peter Pan must return to Neverland and reclaim his youthful spirit in order to challenge his old enemy. Even like getting into this is a really good starting point. Before we actually get into production, just really quickly, what's everyone's thoughts on the fact that this is like an older, mature Peter Pan rather than it being a straight adaptation of the book or the Disney film? Because that's something that didn't surprise me yesterday, because I remember, the fact it's Robin Williams and he's older, but looking at it in today's lens is fascinating because you've got the biggest director in the world at the time is Steven Spielberg in the late 80s. I don't want to say the height of his power because we haven't hit the 90s yet, but it just shows how great his career's been. And he's doing a Peter Pan film, and it isn't what everybody expects. It's actually more of a drama. And I absolutely love this. And I think it's such a very, very personal way for him to tell this story of Peter Pan, a story that's been maybe not necessarily done to death, but maybe a story that everyone is just familiar with, knows the story of. And I wonder, just really quickly bracing on like its reaction at the time, if people just didn't expect it to be like that a Spielberg Peter Pan film by the numbers would be like this perfect adaptation. And I kind of just want to say that I absolutely love that it's a bit different to what is expected. And I think maybe that's why it isn't as well respected from others or contextually, because certainly everyone like my age group, I know me and Sam are similar ages, I don't remember anyone from like primary school or secondary school when it is brought up in conversation saying, I absolutely hate Hook. I think this is a film that a lot of people have attachments to it. And I think very much to compare it to the Stars prequels again. If it was, not that you're going to get Steven Spielberg at a convention, but I guarantee that 90% of people would say, you know what, we actually really like this film, rather than this is awful, this is terrible. It's a fascinating one because it's the whole age complex or something. But how do you all feel with the fact it is an adult Peter Pan and it's more of a drama about his family?
I think it's utter genius. I think it's absolute utter genius. We're in the era of origin stories, and we're obsessed with origin stories, and this is the complete reversal of it. This is the what if a situation happened? What if the superhero went completely off the wall? And I think with those kind of subversive storylines, you're gonna have a bit of a backlash when things like that first come out. It takes time for people to get used to that, and that's why retrospectively I think it's grown, because I think, like, on paper it's sacrilege to say that that Peter Pan, the boy who never grows up to be a really douchey scumbag of, like, a businessman who just disregards anybody but himself. It's absolute sacrilege. And I think that this is why I needed Spielberg to direct it, because the most important thing is that it doesn't lose the heart, because otherwise it becomes a very kind of nasty film, and it's not that. It keeps the heart, but the heart comes from the kids, and actually it's almost like the kids who draw the heart back to Peter Pan so he finds himself. I think it's exceptionally well written. I really do. I think it's very, very underrated and very ambitious as well.
Yeah, I think Spielberg absolutely could have done a retelling or whatever else of a Peter Pan story and done it very well. But I think the main thing, what I think is interesting, is that you take one of the key elements of Peter Pan, which is Peter Pan doesn't grow up, and you throw that out the window. And throughout the proverbial window that's there, the open doors. But I think it's just it's interesting because, again, later on in the film, you see how and why that happens, and it's a happy and sad moment. And I think Spielberg's really good at making you feel a lot of mixed emotions about things, because a lot of it's really bittersweet. And I think a lot of people may have thought, oh well, if he was going to grow up, it would be with Wendy, and the fact that he doesn't do that, but then with her granddaughter, and there's a bit of potentially like weird stuff there, like Wendy's like still probably in love with that boy that she met 80 years ago, but then she loves him as a family member as well. There's this whole weird thing there, but somehow it doesn't feel weird. It feels nice and natural, and because you kind of get the character of what Wendy is, even though she's not in the film very much, you kind of get this, she had a lasting effect. There's a reason why he kept coming back to her, and then eventually would decide, well, I'm going to stay here. So I just think the angle is super interesting. I think it's a risk. It's a massive risk, but I think Spielberg handles it in such a way that makes it feel, just current and just feel right. It doesn't feel wrong, or at least it never felt wrong to me. It felt like, oh, okay, this is what could happen. But it doesn't take away from the original Peter Pan story or anything like that. It's not like the Peter Pan story happened and then immediately, he left Neverland. Like he was still there for another, 60 years before. I mean, you see in, the background, Moira has, A Hard Day's Night poster and Beatles books, so you can see the era. And I love that it's not hammering over the head, oh, this is here and when, things happen, but it's like, oh, this is around this time Peter came back. So no, I think the way he did it was like super good, and I wouldn't change that at all. I'd much rather see this story than another, a Wendy origin story, which is what the Peter Pan films are really. It's about Wendy's first trip to Neverland and stuff.
I think the premise of it is the absolute genius of it, and listening to you now, I've decided that even more. What you've got is essentially Spielberg trying to reclaim, again, it's so Michael Jackson. You've grown up, you were perhaps denied a bit of it, or you've forgotten about what it's like to be young, innocent, and not worry about stuff like money and your job. about happiness and family. It is schmaltzy, but it's good schmaltz. You know, it's what we should be sending as a message, really, in more films, I think. And it's so interesting to think about the idea that you can lose yourself, you can grow up, you can forget about being nice and a good person. And I think that is the genius. If you think about it, it is quite like the Scrooge story, isn't it? You know, you get the flashbacks in Scrooge, and often in the adaptations, it's not like Scrooge was the greatest guy ever, and he was amazing. It's just he lost himself in money and his work, and forgot about what it all meant to be loving and kind and all that. So it's as much about that as being a boy flying, you know, hanging around with, you know, the Lost Boys and all that. I'm sure that's what Steven Spielberg. That's what it's all about for him. And you can tell why he loved it. And I think it's just a better way of doing it than just to do the straight story, because you've got far more redemption in this story, in this version of it. And yeah, there's just so much good in this take on it. And I can't understand why people don't buy into that. And I think you're right though, George. I think more and more people will as the years go on, because it's at the end of the day, it's a Steven Spielberg, Robin Williams film. There'll always be people who are going to look and go back to it and think, "Hang on, why have I not seen that one?" And I hope they do, because I think it's the genius is the premise. I'll say that again.
Yeah, and I wonder as well that not that people don't speak about it, because I do think people have spoke about this online. You do see conversations, but with it coming up sandwiched between Jurassic Park and The Last Crusade, that's quite the, and even Schindler's List after that. It's to me, I always call it the four greatest run of any director ever.
Yeah,
you see the image of those four films. Someone did them back to back to back to back. It's just remarkable, and you can understand why he had to take some years after.
With the arguable exception of the John Glenn run of the 80s.
Oh yeah. You wouldn't start that with For Your Eyes Only. He started with that.
No, I'm not a big fan of Living Daylights, am I?
Right.
But you do have License to Kill, then GoldenEye. So I know it's not John Glenn anyway, but there is. Yeah. But yeah, that's Bond's 60th anniversary. Check out Radio 007 for the week.
Oh no.
No, but I'm happy to make it one, and we'll plug it properly at the end. But no, I mean, let's talk some of the production for this. I mean, Tom, you mentioned the Michael Jackson stuff. Reading the behind the scenes on this, it's honestly like its own story. I mean, just starting the spitball, the premise of all spoke about the what if. The fact one of the writer's kids said, like, "Daddy, like, what if you never grew up?" Seems far too convenient for that kid to be the son of a writer. I hope he just didn't say it for good PR. But as we said, the premise is fascinating, and I think immediately, if you were a studio, you would run with that, because that's far too good a question to not try and answer. And I know that there's a literal Marvel what if series now, which is actually going to defeat the enjoyment of actually what ifs, real what ifs. But for a storytelling device, it really works. And obviously, like, we're sat here in 2022, Disney haven't remade Peter Pan yet, but it's inevitable, right? It's not if, it's when. You know, we're getting a Guy Ritchie Hercules film. Who's had that on a bingo card yesterday? That's just.
I mean, I've wanted that to happen, to be fair, only because I just think I can think of actors who could play parts. And like, I need it to happen. So.
Guy Ritchie, though, they're all going to be Cockneys now. The Greek gods will all actually be from North London. But yeah, that's a different story. But yeah, we know about Spielberg was working with Disney, which is fascinating, because I don't think he's worked with Disney in his career at that point. I'm just scanning in my head we're on episode 14 now, so I don't think he's done a Disney film. I know he does down the line. But yeah, Michael Jackson playing Peter Pan. I mean, that's just a musical with Michael Jackson as Peter Pan. Part of me would be terrified to see it, but at the same time encapsulated by seeing it. Like the dancing and singing would be like second to none. And obviously, West Side Story came out last year, which was Spielberg's first musical, which I think was extraordinary. I'd actually have loved to have seen that in an alternate universe. Don't know if it would have worked, but he cancelled the project in the mid-'80s, and when his son was born. And what actually fascinated me is that the main reason he made this film is for his kids. So his kids were a little bit older, and there's a fascinating interview, I keep bringing this up, that he spoke about before Hook came out. He spoke about that having kids changed his opinion on filmmaking. And at that point in time, he started not criticizing some of his older films, but he very much went with the outset of some of the films he could make. He sort of understood more how they function for children, and so his kids were kind of guinea pigs to films like this. But what I find amazing with the development of this is that not just the kids being involved, but still going with the what if Peter Pan grew up, because it's a very adult theme. And actually jumping into this, one of the big things for this for me is that Spielberg kind of writes this film as himself, that he is playing Peter Pan, that he speaks about in the past that he, because of filming, he would go away and not see his kids, and he'd almost not neglected them, but he speaks about that his kids weren't at the forefront when they should be. So that very much impacts it, and there's really little things in this. Apparently Spielberg's scared of flying, and obviously at the start you've got the whole parachute stuff. I kind of want to ask you guys, I mean, like, prelude this film comes out, just going back to the Michael Jackson, like, there could have been like a million different. I mean, ignore me. Has anyone seen Pan that came out 9 years ago? It was like an origin, and you know what? It's weird because you've got Hugh Jackman playing Blackbeard. It's like a kind of Pan origin, but they're singing "Smells Like Teen Spirit," even though it's set in the 40s still. It's the weirdest film I ever saw in my life, and it always made me think when I saw it is that you go back to Hook and you're like, they tried to do something else with Peter Pan and it just did not work at all. Whereas this really does, and I'm kind of going like not off what we said earlier with the the premise, but going into production, like, do you think a Spielberg Michael Jackson would have worked better than this? Because I don't think so. As great as it could have been, I think Spielberg would have been overshadowed.
No, I would have. Spielberg Michael Jackson sounds fascinating, and it sounds amazing on some level. I'd love to see it, but not at the expense of this, because I think that actually the Robin Williams casting is one of the key points to this, because he restrains himself so much as the adult Peter Pan, and you believe that, but then he brings the classic Robin Williams emotional face when he needs to, that draws the emotion as well. And I'm not sure if Michael Jackson would have been able to have pulled off the idea that he was mature and aging at the time, because Michael Jackson's desire was always to be young, and I feel that would have come out far more than the cynical Peter Pan that we ended up with.
Yeah, you need to have Peter be like as straight laced as possible before he goes to Neverland and whatnot. And I just don't think Michael Jackson has the acting chops to do it. I think he of course has the presence, but I don't think he had what it needs to take on this role. Again, fascinated, but I feel like it could have been an absolute train wreck. So I'm glad it didn't happen. And I think that's one of those nice what ifs, because of course we don't see what happens, so we can always imagine that it would have gone well and whatnot. But for me, no. And I think it's great to see Robin Williams in a role where he isn't just funny all the time. Like a lot of times where he is funny, he's not, the character isn't trying to be funny. It's just, what he's doing. It's just his actions or just some things that he's saying. So no, Michael Jackson, no, but I understand him being part of the initial process potentially.
Yeah.
For me, you're talking about two of my favourite people ever. So I remember when both of them died, I was absolutely devastated. Both so tragic and both so ridiculously talented and almost boundless talent that they didn't know what to do with at times. But I know I'm not sort of a massive fan of what ifs, but this is one where because I love the resulting hook, I wouldn't want to change it at all. But a bit like if you had Diamonds Are Forever with George Lazenby's revenge film, I love Diamonds Are Forever, but of course, who wouldn't want to see that? Any Bond fan would say, "Oh, well, I'd love to see that." But yeah, I think it would, because it'd be so different, because it would be more musically leaned. You'd have a new Michael Jackson set of songs. Of course, that'd be incredible. I think they'd have to do it differently. I do know behind the scenes stuff through my Jackson fandom that I'm sure he put a curse on Spielberg at some point, and I don't know why it's so him to even think of something like that. But I don't know what I think their friendship suffered, didn't it, at some point? I think they were friends by the end because I think Steven Spielberg was at his memorial, but there was something that went. I don't know whether it's because this was abandoned, but I'm pretty sure that Spielberg, he doesn't love this film that much, and he said since he wished he'd done it full blown musical. So maybe he regrets not doing it with Michael Jackson. I don't know, but when it comes to Robin Williams, there's so many of his films that aren't that as popular. Patch Adams, it's that equally. I remember one critic was having a go and saying equally muggy, equally misty-eyed, in that he's sort of mugging and joking for the cameras, and then overdoing it with the sentimentality of crying and sort of doing that side of it. But again, who else can do those two sides so effectively? Because he's not only a comedian, he's a brilliant actor, and you have to respect that. And because he's not a traditional leading man in terms of his looks necessarily, and it's quite funny, they're the hairy body in this, isn't it? But when not that there's nothing wrong with that. Sean Connery, Diamonds Are Forever. Anyway, but I think part of that, he's like an everyman in that sense, and you sort of get behind him as a normal guy. And I think that's so important as to the success of the film. And yeah, if you had Michael Jackson, obviously he's not a normal guy, so that I don't think that would work. But I love to think about that and what could have happened. But I'm glad we've got the hook that we got.
Yeah, I mean, I just did some search. You're right. He paid a Swiss witch doctor 150 grand to put a curse on all his enemies, and one of them was Spielberg, and that's a film I want to see in itself. And without getting to football, it's the famous Adebayor's got a witch doctor stories and whatnot, but I won't get into that. But I didn't even have to recover from finding out. That's completely on it. I want to know more about all his other enemies now. No, this is it. I mean, before we even get to the direction, I'm going to actually begin with, do you want to know who Spielberg's original choice was for Pan? And I'm so happy this didn't happen. It might be deemed controversial because we've just seen him on TV swear at an autograph dealer. Tom Hanks. I can't see it. Not in this take of Hook. I think Robin Williams is what you said, Tom. He's so restricted in his performance in this film, and to me, obviously he's not Woody yet, but Tom Hanks, I just can't see as Peter Pan. I don't think I could take him as seriously in the whole green flying thing. Yeah, I know we would have done big at this point in time, but it's so maybe it's because I'm more familiar with Tom Hanks after his 90s work. I don't know. Could anyone see that? Like, it's so.
It's to me, it's 10 years too early.
Yeah.
Like 2 years before he did Big, where it's just a little boy as an adult, and you're just reversing it in kind of a thing. And he looks young. The beauty of this is that Robin Williams looks very old compared to the rest of it. For me, no.
I can see it more than Michael Jackson for sure, and I think Tom Hanks has got the range to do what he needs to do, and he could have done it very well. But yeah, I think maybe if it was like 96, 97, maybe that would have been like the key time. But I also think because of Big, that was like the first thing I thought of then when he said that it's just too close to that, and I think there's some weird crossover thing that I just can't really get my head around, the idea of Tom Hanks playing those two different characters when both fit is kind of like very similar themes. So no, I mean I can see him. I can definitely, and I can especially see him doing the end battle. I can see that in my mind, but I'm not so confident with his relationship with his kids and with his wife and the whole business side. I don't think at this point he maybe could have done that as effectively as a Robin Williams.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's such a good actor. He could have done it justice. I think he would have made it work, and he is very good at showing that sort of innocent. In Forrest Gump, that innocent sort of look and going back to being a child. I think he could have done that brilliantly, but he's a bit too young at this stage. I think. Actually, I think it's pretty good casting. It's actually quite interesting that, of course, Spielberg and Tom Hanks have had this amazing relationship going on after. So it's quite interesting to learn that it was probably knew each other and had thought about collaborating way before. What was Saving Private Ryan the first one? Then they did.
together, I think Spielberg was meant to direct Big and dropped out.
Right. Okay.
So I wonder if he might have been involved with Hanks then, maybe. But it is interesting. Yeah, I think Saving Private Ryan is the first Tom Hanks Spielberg film, and obviously they've been doing it for sort of decades since. And Tom Hanks is a fascinating one, isn't it? I mean, I'm just going to tell anyone, please watch that video of him telling the autograph dealers to back the fuck off. Like, it's
really worried about
I'm in loads of autograph groups, so that they all know who this bloke was. And apparently, this bloke does it to every celebrity. He's pushing them around, running at them and stuff. And it's just, fair play to him. Not everyone needs to hide their public PR face. You cross a line and you get Woody swearing at you. That the kid's reaction looks like Sid as well out of Toy Story, which makes it funnier. But yeah, not talking about Tom Hanks getting type of autographs. One more thing I want to speak about with Spielberg before we actually get into, I guess, the characters properly. One of the big things for this film is we're looking at his signature traits across Spielberg's career, and it's like abundantly obvious that the biggest impact he's had in all his work is the distant father sort of storyline, and it's very much aligned by his own childhood. I know that his film coming out this year is going to be his most personal film yet. It's going to actually be about his family, just fictionalized, and him growing up. Obviously, the director's autobiography film is a bit of a trend now that they're all jumping on. That's why I think this film works more, is that obviously, again, studying these in like order of release, this is the big jumping point where you see more than anything that this is what's there. This is Spielberg playing Peter Pan. This is his story about maybe he felt disconnected with his children at a certain point. Obviously, they're probably similar ages, 85 to 91. If his oldest was 6, it's a similar age to one of the kids. And it really made me interested with this. And again, I think when directors put not their own lives, but like a personal stamp into a film, it just feels so much more of a film that they've got a creative standpoint, whether it's for dramatic effect or not. It doesn't feel like a studio mandate. It feels like this is Spielberg's vision. And to get a fantasy angle, because he's not really done fantasy in his career up to this point, and I wouldn't say, I'm trying to think if he's done it since. It's not something he's really tackled too much as a genre. But it's really interesting how he approaches it. And again, the fact the crux of the story is Peter Pan beginning to remember. It's a very smart way to begin. And I just kind of wonder, how do you all sort of feel with Spielberg's directing in this film compared to maybe some of his other ones? Or does this stand out for like varying reasons?
I think he's got a lot of his traits. When Tom said about E.T. before, I think E.T. is that's the one that, to me, there's the biggest comparison with, and it's the direction of child actors, I'd say, really, with that. And Spielberg's a master at directing child actors. I wouldn't say that as I think of this film, there's absolute standout moments like you look at that and go, that is direction masterclass. Like I could pick, say, Jurassic Park or Saving Private Ryan. I could go, boom, with the work of a genius here. But this is more competent direction, I'd say, like throughout it, with good performances from most of the cast. Heavily enhanced. I do feel that the emotional bits really hit home. Firstly, because of the facial expressions of the acting, which he completely is an input for. And secondly, the score. I think the score hits the moments for me. Yeah, go on.
No, so I mean, I think in terms of his direction, I feel like my main thought about Spielberg as a director is that he really knows how to create a world. Like no matter what, like so many of his films are so different from each other, and they may not at times feel like, oh, that's directed by the same person, but in all of the films that I've seen that he's done, it feels like a lived-in world. It feels like something that's not as least fake as possible. Which when you're doing a fantasy, it's real like film. It's really you need to be careful because it could very easily go into, oh, that's just rubbish and stuff. And you can tell by his obviously collaboration with John Williams and collaboration in having sets created, because some of the sets here are amazing. But also I think it's you see the juxtaposition between the real world and Neverland, and you see they look so different, but they both look lived in, and that's really great to me. And in terms of the themes, I think at this point it's so interesting when you say about the parent stuff and definitely a father relationship. You see Last Crusade, this film in Jurassic Park. I mean, just as three examples, you get Indiana with his father, you get this film obviously, and then you get Dr. Alan Grant and him understanding relationship with kids that he's probably never really had before. So I think all that is just super interesting, and I think for me it really hits more. And I'm not going to go into too much, but because so many of us will watch films as kids based on what our parents will share with us, and like I said earlier, my dad recorded this off the television for us, and there was quite a few times where he did that with certain films, and he would buy us films. And so when he passed away, it made this film feel even more special. And then just as time's gone on, and as I've watched this film less and less, and then come back to it, the emotions hit 10 times more than they ever did. And I think that's also just a testament to what Spielberg can create. And like John said, I think some of the performances alongside the music absolutely blow everything else out of the water. And I think that creates those standout moments that I truly believe this film really should be remembered for, because there's not many times where you will get amazing family dynamic performances because all of the acting is good. And I would say the majority of the child acting in this is very good compared to so many others. So I think the fact that a child in a film like this could almost get you to cry, I think it's just super impressive. And I think Spielberg truly understands the relationships and dynamics needed.
Yeah, when you talk about whether someone's a good director or not, these days people just seem to be obsessed with flashy shots and cinematography and staging. But when it comes to Spielberg, he's not necessarily just a director, is he? He's a producer. He obviously has the idea in the first place, often, of the whole story, and he contributes to the scripts. He's a producer. And at this stage, like you say, when he now is a massive producer as well, he's just picking whatever he wants and the best things that he wants to do. So he's actually very good at that. He's actually very good at choosing the right films. He's extremely good at bringing everything together. And people don't say Spielberg is their favorite director because of these specific scenes or staging shots. It's because the films are so good. It's as basic as that. It's the final product is that these films have stood the test of time. They're all really enjoyable, and there's a little bit more to them than just a blockbuster film. Especially with this one, they're not a disposable action film, fantasy film, where I'm sure that all the other subsequent things to do with Peter Pan or to do with fantasy children's films, the ones that I've seen anyway, they don't really hit home like this. They don't have that magic about them. And yes, a lot of that is to do with him, but it's also because he can get the best out of the actors. John Williams knows exactly what he's doing with Steven Spielberg, the great combination. He's got his A-team on. It stays the same pretty much from now until today, doesn't it? And with that, you just can create the best products. The things that he brings in new for this, of course, are the actors and the sets. And I know he said himself, hasn't he? I think he doesn't really think they were up to snuff. But I mean, I totally disagree with that. I think it's so well done that you've got the real world that he doesn't particularly glamorize. And then that's in America. It looks like bog standard cinematography and all that, nothing flashy. We then go to London and, it feels magical. I really do. Like there's that sheen on the camera, the shot of the hook going up the staircase through that is incredible. And also you've got then Neverland is just completely magical. So you've got three different stages to the film, and he's so good at bringing those out. And with John Williams as well, it helps that you've got somebody there who guides you along. And I know people now, they don't particularly like, it's not fashionable to have a score that sort of speaks to you and says, this is what's going on, this is where we are. We just need sort of background music. But this really weaves a tapestry here of magic. And I think Spielberg is at the front of it all. And yeah, I think, again, what would you have done differently to direct it for what you're trying to achieve? And that means that even if it might not be the most flashy, in-your-face direction, he's done it exactly how it should be done for this film.
Yeah, and I think going for what you said then with Neverland as well, if you were making something like Neverland in the early 90s,
Yeah.
you're not going to get, you don't have the green screens, the blue screens that we have the luxury of, like even like the stagecraft today with the Mandalorian and things. Neverland looks great, and I like what you said, that it's so flat and boring, America, where when they're not in Neverland, it is intentionally shot in this dramatic fashion that, you know, Peter Pan is older, he's a lawyer, he's this bloke, and it doesn't need to be riveting until that point. It's the wonder of going into Neverland, and we'll get to speak about John Williams later, which I can't wait for because he's absolutely incredible in this film. But what I want to actually sort of talk about is getting to some of the characters. I mean, we've spoken a fair amount about Robin Williams already, but how does this? I mean, his work as an actor, calling it legendary is an understatement, but seeing him in this more dramatic role. And I think what Spielberg does with this, and I think it's in Robin's performance, he's able to make this character likable, not just for adults, but for children too. And that's actually a really good sort of Spielberg theme, is that the reason why his films work so well is because children enjoy them and so do adults. And that is a very, very rare thing where a director can do both of those. To connect them is a lot harder than they say, but I don't want to sit here and say this is one of his best performances. I think it is. It's almost impossible to compare this to some of his other roles, whether they're dramatic ones, comedy ones, but it's a real, I think, amalgamation of Robin Williams' career, like what he's capable of doing as an actor with drama, with that added comedy. The scene I always go to is the back and forth with Rufio, where you're starting to see more of like that Robin Williams coming out of his shell, but you're seeing the sort of childish antics in him, and it's very funny, it's very comedic. And I just want to kind of ask him, well, I mean, we'll get into Captain Hook shortly because I know I've not spoken on it, which is going to be amazing. But yeah, what do you think of his performance with this? And again, we've not got other Peter Pans to compare it to, which is actually, again, like fascinating that 30 plus years down the line, it's almost, I mean, I know there has been some others, but you've not had that mega blockbuster take on it that everyone's going to compare to. I think Hook still stands at the top of the Peter Pan films, that are not including obviously the original animated Disney one. Does that make sense? Is that fair?
Yeah. This is the Robin Williams film that got me into Robin Williams, and he's now in my 5 favorite actors of all time. And I was encaptured by it when I was a kid, but now as I look back and I see the full scope of his range, he does everything in this film. He plays it straight at the beginning and dislikable and selfish, and you see the journey he goes on, how he softens towards them, and he is brilliant at emotion in this film. And then it gives him license to go full Robin Williams OTT when he becomes Peter Pan. After that, there's still the emotion with the kids, absolutely, but he's then got the space to do the little bits that we all love. So one of the things I always remember is when they have the war at the end, and they get the egg gun, and the fire in the egg gun, and he starts going, and there's all the chicken faces and all that, and there's that space for him to do that there, and he carries this film in a lot of ways in a very understated way. You can go over the top with it. I couldn't imagine anybody else in this role. That's the only way I can describe it. So to me, that's testament to how great he was in this film.
The character of Peter, just in a general sense, is just really, I can't say he's boring or anything, but in terms of like the grand scheme of just the overall story of Peter Pan, but Peter is just a very, he's the main person from Neverland who comes and take these people away, and there's a lot to be done with that character. He's kind of a blank slate in a way in which he has these key elements, but then that's it. There's nothing else. So that's another good reason I think why this story works, because you can absolutely expand this character to the limit, and I think that's what Spielberg does, and that's what Robin Williams does in his acting. And as John said, because we see him go on the journey, we see him develop. He went from this early teen or about to become a teenager. He stays in the real world, and then he kind of, as much as he evolves in other areas, he completely devolves in others. So it's kind of like a newfound evolution for him to kind of strike this balance between taking, you know, stock of his responsibilities, but then also understanding that you can't be, you know, so adult and grown up about absolutely everything. You need to, you know, strike that balance. And, you know, I think we truly see that at the end of the film. So I think it's just so good that he's able to make you, I still kind of like his character in the beginning. Like, I know like what he's doing, but I'm still like, you understand what he's doing. And I think part of the reason why that works is because everyone around him is so good. Because I think it'd be so easy for his wife and his kids to be disliked because it's like, oh, it's Peter Pan's family. Like, how dare they? They're the ones who've taken him away. You know, that I feel like people could genuinely have that mindset. But because I've got her name, because Caroline Goodall is like so good at her performance as Moira, I absolutely love her in this film. And I think because the kids do such a great job, I think you want Peter to get back to them, and you want him to be a good person for them. And so it's absolutely necessary for Robin Williams to then, you know, go through that evolution, go through that journey, and really, you know, be strict with himself as an actor to kind of go, okay, I need to be a certain way at this point in the film, but later on, I can then take it that next step, and then you can do all the, you know, the normal Robin Williams things, as in making the faces, the sounds of his voice. You know, I think at this point in time, we're like, I would say, you know, peak Robin Williams era is the 90s. Every single thing that he does is kind of a knockout for me. And I think this is really just the start of amazing things to come with, you know, his performances in Mrs. Doubtfire and his voice in Aladdin and stuff. So,
yeah, it's interesting. It came before, didn't it? It came before Aladdin, because like Aladdin really was the first time. Oh, hang on, we can have a sort of adult comedian being a little bit naughty, but in a sort of in a child's film, and we can get away with those adult jokes, and that's pretty much become the blueprint for every animated film ever since, hasn't it? But you've got to use, if you've got your A game, you've got your A star sort of actor, you've got to use him. You've got to use your weapons, and you've got to use them to the benefit of the film. I think just mentioning Caroline Goodall, actually, you're absolutely right. She's entirely sympathetic. They could have done her like, oh, she sort of turned him away and made him a sort of horrible guy, and she's really materialistic, and she wants him to do this job and have a lovely home and this kind of thing. But no, she's actually more with Wendy, isn't she? She's like, they're on the same team trying to get him back, because the kids, again, it's the kids that are the most important thing. She just wants the best for the kids, and that means that the dad needs to stop messing about with his work so often. And of course, you have the scene at the beginning missing the baseball game and all that. But yeah, in fact, Caroline Goodall, I mean, I don't know one of these actresses who's so unknown, but she was in the thing on the BBC. It was like a miniseries in the mid-90s called Sculptress, and it was like a serial killer. Well, no, she killed her entire family, but played by Pauline Quirk, yeah, from Birds of a Feather. I'm not joking. Unbelievably good performance against type. And Caroline Goodall I think she was like the lawyer investigating it, and it was, did she do it? Didn't she do it? And it was that's superb. But again, no chance of finding that. But she's brilliant. Just going back to Robin Williams, though, I think you really do get the best out of him. And thinking of some of his other roles, Mrs. Doubtfire, of course, again, it's the opposite, isn't it? He's a boy at heart, and he just won't grow up, and that's seen as a bad thing. But it's also, that's why he's so good with his children. And by the end of that film, you realise that no, he has to grow up a little bit and take sort of more responsibility of his life. But at the end of the day, he's such a good father, and no one can argue with that. I saw Francis Ford Coppola's Godfather. I finished it this morning again, seeing it again. But his best film, Jack, of course, that's another example of again, another mid-90s Robin Williams, absolutely brilliant film that's been completely forgotten. And in that, again, it's him being, a 10-year-old in a 40-year-old's body, and it's so emotional, that film. It's the same thing again, and that if you don't cry during that, then it's I really want everyone to see that. But it's that, and I remember we saw it when we were on holiday in America, and my dad, I think it was talking about that and Hook, and my dad just said, hasn't he made some lovely films that everyone can watch and that kids can watch? Because there's very few actors out there who have got a body of work where, yeah, I want to show my kids Mrs. Doubtfire, Aladdin, Hook, Jack, and all these other films. Bicentennial Man, please see that. Absolutely
Oh
brilliant.
my goodness, I forgot
But again,
about that.
But again, the whole film. He's a robot, and he's restraining his performance. And it's only when he gets more human-like that he becomes Robin Williams. So it's that he's very good at doing both, and that's why it works in all these films, and especially here. He is perfect for the role that he's playing.
Well, he's also in this time done a lot of very serious films. You know,
Yeah.
wasn't it
We haven't seen
1990? He did Awakenings, where he's playing the absolute straight guy to Robert De Niro, million miles away from anything like this. So, and it's really important that people don't just put him in a box as to what Robin Williams is, because he's a phenomenal actor.
We did Insomnia a few years ago on the channel on the Nolan stuff. Nolan's his second or third film, and you've got Al Pacino with Robin Williams. You know, and it's just phenomenal. And the reason I wasn't going to Mrs. Doubtfire is it's got Pierce Brosnan in, so there we go. Like that's always been the one as a kid. You know, you got the Bond hype, then you Mrs. Doubtfire. I was like, forget Robin Williams, Pierce Brosnan's here.
We've got Matilda, James Bond, the genie. Oh my goodness!
Forrest Gump Mum.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I was trying to think what else Sally Field's in, but I mean, all I can think
Spider-Man
of
2. You join us on that?
Beyond the Poseidon Adventure. Just terrible with Michael Caine, terrible, but she's great at it. And anyway, not Mrs. Doubtfire. Will another time.
No, it's just everyone check out as many Rob Williams films as you can, because I think, as you said, he's so underrated for his dramas and his non-comedic roles because he has that history with comedy. And one thing I kind of close the Rob Williams stuff on it is that old saying that sometimes comedy actors can move into drama and do a lot better at it than dramatic actors that try and do comedy. It's always the former that wins in that regard. But let's talk about one of the greatest villain roles not of Spielberg's career, Dustin Hoffman as Captain Hook. Now, I'm going to have to be honest, I've not seen the Jason Isaacs film, and I love Jason Isaacs. But Dustin Hoffman in this is just incredible. Is every single caricature you want and need from a British captain as a villain. You don't need I don't necessarily say it's simple, but the fact that the Dustin Hoffman was cast in Spielberg's original mid-80s version, and that would have been before Rain. I've not seen Rain Man either, actually, so I've got to admit that. But that would have been before Rain Man as well. I've not seen many Dustin Hoffman films. I know the first I saw him was Meet the Fockers, so once you've said that, that's kind of all of it. But how do you? I mean, to me, my favorite role, yes, I'm into my film and the more serious stuff, but there is something about villain roles that are just so much more entertaining than heroes. And you can have the most in-depth, wonderful hero in history, and that's great. But if you can just have a villain to match him, whether that's via performance, story, or action or anything, the great hero needs a villain, and just Dustin Hoffman in this is just outstanding. And I just, and not to, I know Disney do this, so I can't joke about it anymore, but they were going to do a spin-off of Beauty and the Beast with the villains. Just imagine another world where there was a Dustin Hoffman and Smee spin-off. Just any scene he's in, he's extraordinary. You know what else is? I think his best scenes are just him talking to himself around Smee.
Yeah.
And that's the testament of a villain. It's not even him with the hero. It's just him being himself. And he is just amazing in this film. I absolutely love him.
So I said that Robin Williams was in my top 5 actors. Dustin Hoffman is also in my top 5 actors. And I am a massive fan of the mid to late 70s films of Dustin Hoffman's career. So Kramer versus Kramer is one of my favorite films of all time. Marathon Man, absolutely love it. Stuff like Lenny, very intense stuff. Midnight Cowboy, I know it's earlier, but all this stuff, Dustin Hoffman to me is one of the great actors of the last 50 years. And this was the first film I saw him in. And now going back and watching all his thing, he is unrecognizable to me. I still to this day, from the way that he speaks and the way that he looks, I couldn't tell you that was Dustin Hoffman unless I knew it. I don't get it. It just is not Dustin Hoffman to me. It's Captain Hook, and that's what it should be. And what he does, he just chews the scenery. Good form, and he's just big smile on his face when he does it. You know, he's like pantomime villain. Talking to the sets, if you notice it, in one of the piers is called the Good Form Pier, which I think is absolutely outstanding. But love all that. Love the little bits where like he wants to walk down the steps, but he waits until Smee puts the red carpet down and those kind of things. And he has 50 pairs of his same boots out there. And there's some really dark humor, like when he's trying to commit suicide and these kind of things. Very dark humor, especially in a U. But what I love about it is his over-the-top performance highlights the effect of Neverland. He is the baddie, he is the villain, he's the evil one, and yet he is far, far, far less cynical than Peter Pan is when he comes to Neverland. He is the one who's completely over the top, and it shows me the effects of Neverland. And I think because Robin Williams restrains himself, it's the right way to go to have a complete OTT villain in this film. And for me, Dustin Hoffman as Captain Hook is one of the top 10 favorite movie villains of all time. I absolutely love him.
Well, this is it, because I mean, would you rather play Peter Pan or Captain Hook? And I think in this film specifically, it would be Captain Hook, because you absolutely get to chew every single scene up. Like, it's so good. I mean, as a kid, my favorite scene, or at least my favorite Captain Hook scene, was his conversation with Smee, and then his "Don't try to stop me this time, Smee. Don't you dare try to stop me this time. Try to stop me. Like, I'm committing suicide." Like, and barely understanding what it meant, but it was just so funny. The relationship with Bob Hoskins is just it just works so well, and just his whole demeanor, his vibe. I mean, as it like every single thing, even at the very beginning when you see him, and then like he says who one of you betrayed me. He goes from complete serious evil to then he's like the boo box to Glenn Close, and it's just so funny. Like, it's just that's another great thing about this film. Like, people can just switch like this, and you get a load of characters that can Rufio kind of like has the same thing as well, but Captain Hook does it all the time. He'll go from serious to camp to a bit emotional, maybe, to absurd. Him laughing to himself, him smashing clocks. You see the fear on his face when it comes to the crocodile and the clocks. Like, it's just an amazing performance. And I've got to be honest, I've not really seen Dustin Hoffman in much at all, so I don't have a lot of knowledge on him just as an actor from my own experience, but he's one of those names that because of the amount of work, the variety of work that he's done, that he is able to put on so many faces, essentially. And this is such a unique face because it's so different from anything else. And I love that, because you're in Neverland, he's this kind of weird mix of, he is adult, but he's also incredibly childish in what he wants and what he does and how he does it. He's like, "Oh, I don't want to kill, any, Indians today," or whatever he says about that. Like, he's, he says it so blasé, like, "I've had enough of killing lost boys." And it's like, whoa, you're saying about, killing, a lot of different people, and you're just saying it like it's willy-nilly. And it's just so funny how you kind of feel like this kind of like depressed old man, who's kind of lost without his nemesis there, which kind of like shows the importance of Peter's return and how disappointed he is that he's not what he was. So no, the whole thing is great, and it's such a shame when at the end when he goes, but no, absolutely love his character.
Do you think though that again, this is far more philosophical than it's probably meant to be, but in Neverland, sort of time stands still, doesn't it, and everything? I imagine that he doesn't die necessarily, but it's like we love playing and fighting against each other, like play fights as kids. and that he and Pam will always do that, and neither of them will ever die, or they'll always, like when you're playing with your toys as kids, you had fights with them and stuff, and then you go back the next day and do the same thing again. And in that way, he's an unusual villain in that he's sympathetic from the start, even though it's so scary when you've only had hints of him. The hook scratched, up the staircase. He's never then presented as some absolute nutter who's terrifying. He's only bad, but he doesn't come good at the end. So he's just in an endless circle of, like you say, Sam. He's going through so many mixed emotions, messed up behavior. But the casting, I mean, on paper, Robin Williams was like, oh my word, that's the best casting ever. That's perfect. Like, I can understand why they did that. But you're right, Dustin Hoffman. I didn't know who he was really when he was cast. And I just remember my dad was like, you won't believe who that is as Hook. It's Dustin Hoffman. I was like, well, I don't really know who he is, Dad. Sorry. But so never mind the look. Obviously, I realised what he really looks like. And then it was like, oh, whoa, he is quite different. And then does that happen these days? Casting someone and then can you do something completely different? Do it so we don't really know it's you. Like, we trust you as an actor that much that we're going to give you a completely weird role. It does happen, but it's more not so much big Hollywood names. It might be more character actors who do it. But yeah, I've only gone back and seen a lot of his films that John's mentioned since, and he was still pretty big, in the mid-90s. Outbreak, I remember. Loads of other films, but Kramer versus Kramer is a ridiculously good film. Very, very realistic. I don't think he got an Oscar. Did he get an Oscar for that? Meryl Streep did. So
I think he did get an Oscar for that.
Yes, he did. Actually, yeah.
He certainly got nominated.
He got Rain Man.
So he must have won one with Rain Man. I'll check that out for you.
Yeah, but Rain Man again is so different because that's one way you'd say, well, hang on, Tom Cruise is actually deserving of an Oscar in that film because he's the straight man. Without that, it doesn't work. The sort of the over the top acting, perhaps, in that from Dustin Hoffman. He did he win for that?
Yeah,
he did. Yeah. And you can do show The Graduate. And I know it's a classic that not many people have seen our age, but my word. It's a comedy. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. It was totally different to what I thought. And he's perfect for the part in it. Yet it's a completely different part and a completely different type of acting. So yeah, for me, Dustin Hoffman, he's outstanding. He's very likable. Even in Runaway Jury, things like that, he's fantastic. That's another underrated film with him. And you get him and Gene Hackman on the screen together. Good grief. There's not many films you can say that the quality of acting and the rapport between them. And in this, I love him. I wouldn't want to imagine anyone else. And it's all part of the mystery and the magic of the film that you've got this huge actor playing a really odd role behind makeup. I mean, it's hilarious at the end when his wig comes off, isn't it? And it is scary that the sort of as a viewer, you're thinking, oh no, Jack, he's going to be his dad, and he's forgetting that Peter's his real dad. And when he dresses up, it's really quite stressful as a kid watching that, and it's quite harrowing. And yeah, there's so much going on in this film. It's so good.
I'm trying to think of over-the-top villains that are like recent, and I'm just stuck in the 90s. I don't know if Willem Dafoe can count as the Green Goblin, but it's not something you get often anymore.
Wonder Woman, the new one that everyone hates that I like. Pedro
Pedro. Good. Sorry, I thought you meant Cheetah. Yeah, Pedro's
fantastic. As well. Yeah.
But can anything get past Nicolas Cage in Face Off?
I mean, there's I think you get a couple of those Jurassic World villains, like the one in Fallen Kingdom who's getting the teeth. Like he's a bit over the top in what he's doing. Yeah. I mean, not to the extent, but where it's like it's not such a straight performance.
That's Toby Stevens. I'm getting mixed up. Ignore me.
Great over-the-top villain in Die Another Day, though.
Yes. Jonathan Pryce in Someone Never Dies. Yeah. Completely. Yeah. I think I just like OTT hammy villains, to be honest.
Yeah. Ian McDiarmid in Star Wars, proper stage actor being told do a spin, all that sort of stuff. It is a fascinating, and you got to think for actors, like so many actors enjoy playing villains as well, and there's a reason why. because you can just get let loose, and this film does that. And actually, if we spoke a lot about Smith, so might as well speak about Bob Hoskins really quickly if anyone wants to. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I haven't seen that many Bob Hoskins films. He's actor I was quite unfamiliar with growing up, but I love him in this. And it's that when you have that over the top villain, it's their counterpart who have they got to go back and forth with that's gonna make them that much funnier. And I absolutely love him in this. I think he's so not just well cast. It's almost like the role is made for him of Smee. And you get actors at some points in their careers where there's a role where you just see that and think only they could play them. And I think nowadays, I think Stephen Graham gets a lot of them. I know he literally played a pirate in one of the Pirates of the Caribbean films, didn't he, as well? But it's like you get certain actors at certain points when films are made, and I really like him in this. And again, because I'm not familiar with his work, I don't know how big it was in comparison to the rest of his career. I know he played Mario in that film that no one gets to speak about anymore. But now we're all suffering with Chris Pratt as Mario in the future.
Go on, John.
When you think of Bob Hoskins, I think of The Long Good Friday, which is one of the most acclaimed British gangster films of all time. And he is 100 million miles away from what he is in this. I mean, he just plays it over the top. He's in Fantasyland, and he's a warm villain. You know, you like him. And that's brilliant. No, I just love him. I can't say anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I've not watched him that much, but I mean, you know, around the time that I would, you know, we'd be watching Hook as a kid, my sister would also be watching Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And you know, it's never been a film that I've loved, and it's one that I've not gone mad to for a long time, so maybe I should watch it again. But I know he plays his character is so different from Smee. And then the only thing that really sticks out in my mind, which probably shouldn't, but it's his cameo in Spice World, where where Jerry Halliwell voices over him, but he's so into it. He's just wearing a suit, and then he does the peace sign and goes "girl power, equalization between the sexes," and it's just so funny. And I think Bob Hoskins was an actor who was fine to just go wild and go wherever. And I think it's always good when actors don't feel like they need to contain themselves in a certain way, like they can just completely go with what they're being given in the script and roll with it. And I think the character in Smee in this is super interesting because, you know, the original animated version's very much more like a bumbling fool. He's there for Captain Hook. That relationship is still there, but he's more bumbling. He's less competent, I would say. But in this, he very much understands, and you know, part of it could be because, you know, compared to, you know, a usual Peter Pan story, this is so much time later. So he absolutely knows what Hook's going to do. The fact that when Hook holds the gun against his head, he's like, not again. Like their relationship is just so much fun, and I like the characters seem to enjoy each other because they may be the only two people who can talk to each other because the rest of the pirates are just don't know anything else, are just fools. So I just love that, and I love his portrayal now, and I love that at the end of the film he is there. If there's any character who's going to have a real life, you know, person, you know, in the real world, then it's him. Usually in a form of Peter Pan story, it's usually Captain Hook who has like a similar, you know, male version in the real world. So I know in the 2004 film with Jason Isaacs plays Hook, and he also plays Wendy's father. So you have that, and I know in the animated version, in the original Disney version, that, you know, the father isn't Captain Hook, but they share very similar, you know, personalities. So I think that's there. So I think the idea that Smee got that it wasn't Dustin Hoffman, that it was Bob Hoskins who had that, was really different and fun. And I think especially because he just seems like such a joy. He's just sleeving up glasses. He's like, it's just with that Cockney accent. I think it's just so nice. But yeah, nothing but praise for Bob Hoskins in this. He really does a good job with what he's got.
Yeah, that's reminding me what you've said there, Sam, about the Jason Isaacs and Smee and how they're in the real world. It's a bit like Jumanji, isn't it? That Jonathan Hyde plays his father, but he also plays the sort of hunter, doesn't he, within the game? Because that's partly him projecting his, you know, bad feelings towards his own father and what he sees as him in the game, which is class. I think that's brilliant. But yeah, Bob Hoskins he's one of these people where if you asked anyone under the age of 40, probably on the street, they wouldn't have a clue who he was, despite he's got an amazing CV. the guy. Just think of the guy. He's like tiny. He's slightly unusual looking. Would someone like him today be such an amazing actor across so many different roles? You know, he's played a leading man. He's played a comedy. He's played sidekicks. He's done absolutely everything. He's played Super Mario. And I did see that once when it came out of video, and I can't really remember it. I know apparently it is one of these, no, it is as bad as everyone remembers, but I think even he says he wasn't a fan of it. But yeah, in the early 90s, Who Framed Roger Rabbit was absolutely massive. Honestly, I know you guys were too young, but that was like the biggest film for kids, and another one which pretty inappropriate for kids in many respects, quite scary. But it was completely pioneering, obviously, Robert Zemeckis. But to give the main role to Bob Hoskins is so new. An English guy playing a sort of, you know, gangster type American detective who's sort of the straight man at many times, with Kathleen Turner, of course, as Jessica Rabbit. That you should see it again, Sam. I saw it quite recently, and it's so good. And Christopher Lloyd is the baddie as well, who's loving it. Obviously, there's, you know, him playing a different role to Back to the Future. It's fantastic. I've not seen The Long Good Friday. I know Evans says it's the greatest film ever made, but I saw Mona Lisa quite recently, and that's another Neil Jordan, isn't it? Sort of gangster. You know, it's not nothing that would get made today, but he's certainly got an Oscar nomination for one of them, or not both. He's got an amazing CV, and he died, you know, relatively young, and just seems to have been forgotten. But he's one of the great British character actors that we had, and people might remember him in the BT adverts. It's good to talk. Remember that? Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
this is. I mean, again, George, you might know. I don't know. This was
I
probably.
remember now you said the BT adverts. I can remember them.
In fact, they had one with ET, and didn't they? And it had the ET theme and stuff. But in this, he's fantastic. He's absolutely brilliant. And it was another one where, a bit like Joe Pesci in Home Alone, it's quite odd to see someone who was associated with really adult films in a sort of child's, you know, in a family film, but still that sort of naughty part, that sort of gangster but lovable rogue kind of role. And he does it brilliantly. And like you say, the 1-2 between him and Smith and Captain Hook is magnificent. I love it.
Yeah, I don't want to divert the conversation, but I was meant to say on Captain Hook. I could talk for hours, so I won't. But David Bowie was almost Captain Hook, which I'm just sat here. Every time David Bowie was almost someone, I get a bit excited. So I'm not going to get into that. Otherwise, I'll be here moaning about why he wasn't Joker still.
I mean, he could have been Max Zorin and Captain Hook. Yeah. I mean, let's just imagine that world. I mean, oh my goodness.
Labyrinth was another one that wasn't big at the time for some reason.
Yeah, people love it. People love Labyrinth.
I saw it recently for the first time. I think I was the wrong age.
Oh,
so I
yeah. Well, that's the problem, isn't it? Yeah.
But let's. I'm actually going to talk about what may be my negative for the film. Sorry if anyone's a fan. I really don't like Tinkerbell. Now. Is it the performance from Julia Roberts? I know there was a lot of personal stuff going on in her life at the time. So, and I've never really seen many of her films, but I never, like, as a kid, I never really cared about Tinkerbell. I found her really annoying, and watching it again as an adult, I was in the same vein. So I've not got anything nice to say, so I'm going to pass it over to one of you guys if anyone liked the performance a bit more. But if I'm being blunt, I also couldn't get over the hair as well.
Right. It doesn't grate on me. It doesn't take away my enjoyment of the film. It's certainly not as larger than life than the three people we talked about before, and it's. I'm going to say this now, and then I'll regret saying this when this goes on the internet. But when Tinkerbell becomes full size and tries it on with Peter Pan, as a 5-year-old boy, that raised many questions and emotions in me. That I became a man quite quickly.
The Xenionotop of your child.
It was the U version of Xenionotop.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think actually now you've said it is because just how ridiculous her hair and her costume is initially for her actually to become into this beautiful woman, kind of like a Disney princessy kind of dress thing, probably adds to it. The problem with Tinkerbell in general is that she's naturally a mute character, so it's quite hard to actually like do something with it. It's all right. Go on, Sam. See if you've got.
I think Tinkerbell is an interesting. I feel like I would never ever say this line that Tinkerbell is like a really interesting character, just because, I feel like the character of Tinkerbell in kind of like as a Disney product, especially, has kind of like gone on to be its own separate thing.
Yeah.
But I think there's a real missed opportunity with this character here, because I think firstly, one, just in terms of the actual visual, I think the costuming's not right. I think that the hair is not right either. I don't know what the idea was to go for that look. I think the look that the dress and hair look that she has with that is much better. But to me, it's still not a Tinkerbell look. I don't know what they were trying to go for. But I feel like, again, Tinkerbell is like Peter's best friend, really. I mean, if we go back to kind of like just the animation, just the basic story, Peter has the Lost Boys, but Tinkerbell is like the constant companion that he has. So I think Tinkerbell's best moment is in the old hangout in the tree. I feel like for me that's the best part of Julie Roberts' performance, and it's the best part of Tinkerbell that we get, because we see her there, and I feel like you see on her face the different emotions, and in the flashbacks where she sees Peter kiss Moira and her wings go down and her face just drops. And I think it's one of those things where it's like, you can constantly be around someone and have like maybe loving feelings, but you would never act upon them because it would never happen. And to see that person and go with someone and then stay is completely soul destroying maybe for that person. So for her to then get this person back completely different, and then somehow, I don't know how she became full size, but to become full size and then not have him again, I feel really bad for the character, and I just feel like there could have been more to do with that, because if you're giving us glimpses of that, then there should be more with that. But then I think it could get too serious and get too down one way. So I think it's really difficult. But I will say, aside from that tree scene as well, I love her goodbye scene. I think that's one of my favorite lines. It's like, that place between going to sleep and I can't remember whatever, and being awake or whatever, like that's where I'll be waiting. And that's one of the tear up, like that makes me like incredibly emotional. Yeah. And I think she does a good job. So I feel like it's less Julie Roberts' fault, because I've seen her in a lot of other things and she is great, but I think it is more the direction of her and that character, which is a real shame, because I feel like there's a lot that you could do with that character, especially because she doesn't speak. A lot of it is about visual and performance, and she's not really given too much of that. But I think there's so many characters in this film that I think, unfortunately, she just gets shafted a little bit.
I hadn't really sort of thought much about her character going into this, but I'm going to have to defend her massively. I think again, the casting is very unusual at the time, because you'd had Pretty Woman, where yes, she's very sweet in that and everything, but it is, it's 15. It's a bit, the subject matter is obviously adults, and to cast her in a family film like this as a sort of sweet, innocent, fairy was quite a big thing at the time. And I think she's a fantastic actress, and she's Erin Brockovich. I know she won an Oscar for that. If you've seen that with her and Albert Finney, he's so good in that as well. Absolutely brilliant. And she not only can act, but she's never really been someone who lads would have as a pin-up. She's not sort of never fallen into that, which has helped her, I think, perhaps in some ways, be taken more seriously as an actress. But in this, I just think it's another subplot that I find really interesting and really harrowing. Like Sam's just said, the disappointment, to go from the elation that he's back, and she really helps him, without her, Peter wouldn't have realised who he was, would he? And never would have realised he was Peter Pan again. So she's crucial to the plot. She has character development, and I know, strong female characters and all this sort of stuff. But she's a pretty decent character in that sense. That she inevitably the heartbreak of always loving him, but knowing that it was never going to happen, and then she gets that chance, and it's very well played by both of them. The sort of dismissiveness of Robin Williams. It's quite sad that when she gets turned down, but then she doesn't sort of go off in a huff the whole film. She really still continues to help him and appreciates that his children, because she's the one, isn't she, that suggests think of you in order to fly. Think of you. What do you love the most in the world? My children. I mean, damn, I could cry just thinking about this now, even though I don't have kids. But it's so well done, and I think the hair thing and all that. That's just I don't fancy girls who look like that. Probably, no offense. I mean, I don't. She's meant to be a tomboy, though, isn't she? She's meant to be his mate and someone who played together. And she's not meant to be some sort of sexy figure particularly. But casting obviously a beautiful actress might lead some people into thinking that. But the part isn't meant to be, I don't know, some hot babe who's got wings and then what you do. Here's what you could have won, kind of thing. She's meant to be a tomboy who's sort of part of the group, but one of the boys, really, isn't she? And I think she's very good at that.
It's a weird one because I think when you think about it, it's just not like a sexualization of it at all, but it's like I think the film's so weird with it, and it's just that the haircut. It's more like I know they're going for like a pixie cut. She's a pixie, right? It's that sort of thing that looks really weird on the costume department. But yeah, I'm not fussed about like hair colors and stuff. Isn't the whole like Daniel Craig's not blonde thing? I'm not too fussed about it. It's just, the role feels really weird, and it's a bit sort of research on when she is suddenly tall and grown up and she's making moves on him. It's so weird as a viewer as well. I don't know. Maybe it's because of what you used to with Peter Pan.
Well, this if your only reference is the Disney animated version where one she's silent, she's cheeky. Her costuming and hair is very much prima ballerina.
Yeah.
It's completely not that at all. And I think that's where there could be, a break in that as well. And I think that's why I don't think the costuming and the hair needed to be exactly that at all.
No.
But I think there just should have been something else.
Yeah, it's what I say. The costume test would just been. I wonder what else they would have been. The whole design looks. It's just very odd. I just feel the whole thing's really weird. I think when you've got like Dustin Hoffman as well, and everyone looking exactly like what they did in the other versions, it still stands out. One thing I want to speak about. We haven't got to the Lost Boys yet, but we'll try and go through them because I know we've been on quite a while already. But I'm able to talk about Wendy. Did not know Maggie Smith played her. Completely blew my mind yesterday. Aged up Maggie Smith as well, which I think is actually one of the genius bits of casting from this film. How do you all feel? I mean, I know this goes back to what was earlier. It's about Peter Pan. He's grown up, but we've got an older Wendy. I love this whole angle. I know it's a bit. I know it's the sort of start and end we get to see her, but I love this default that they've had this life together that she's known and he's just forgotten. And I think it adds a really interesting effect. But when you're bringing in like a legend like Maggie Smith, it just brings gravitas to the performance. And it's that, we're going to England now. Great, we've actually got a British actor to play this role, whereas it would have felt so not Americanized, but a lot of films do that. Like, we've gone to England, everyone's American because we're still filming in America. It just feels like it adds a bit of class, which is what this film deserves, and it has. And yeah, I've not got much to say on it, but I just really enjoy being this. And also, obviously growing up with Harry Potter, it's just amazing to see Maggie Smith in things anyway. But again, just didn't know as an adult she was in this film at all. Honestly, I was like, is that Maggie Smith?
Yeah.
And it was.
Absolute props to the makeup department. I said this to Tom like last week. I think she looks older there than she does now.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And she plays. Well, she's the wise old sage, isn't she? Who is trying to bring him back. It's slightly weird when there's the flashback scene, and he keeps going back, and he goes, "Why won't you come back with me?" And she goes, "That's my granddaughter in the bed."
Yeah.
What happened for the 20 years in between, and when it was a daughter and all the rest of it? It's always, I've always questioned that bit. But Maggie Smith she has a gravitas to the film. Can't say any more than that. You know, she misses out for the vast majority of the film. She's in the beginning and the end, and that's enough. She plays that role as that how time's passed her by. She's aged, but her spirit hasn't aged. She still has that youthful spirit, and that's the key to her role in this film. And again, that's an amazingly written. That, like, when you're thinking about the what if with the Peter Pan, and then you juxtapose it to Wendy and how she has aged but not spiritually. I think that's phenomenal. Really, really well written and really well played.
Yeah, Wendy in this, like, there's a great sense of comfort, and again, I think, you know, Wendy's another character that, you know, we think is, you know, well established anyway, just, you know, in audiences' minds about who she is and her importance to the story. And so again, with the angle of, you know, having Peter grown up, you need to have Wendy grown up as well. You know, the first time I tear up during this film is her first appearance when she says "hello, boy" and you can't see her, and then the music comes on, and, you know, I think that's that whole part of just this introduction to London and to this house, which obviously is a very special place. You know, Moira runs in and she's like, "We were children in these," and she feels a sense of wonderment by just being there. And yeah, so what I love is just that, and I love that her realistic approach about things. She's like, "I've forgotten how to fly." You know, she still has that spirit, but she's like, I've forgotten how to do that, and I need to, you know, move on. But you know, and I love just how protective she is of her family and her story, but how much she loves it as well. But yeah, just so many good things to say about her. She does a great performance, and, you know, I think, like John said, a lot of gravitas, and she does bring it down to earth for sure.
Well, George, you like my comparison. It's very much like casting. I've forgotten his name now. In Palpatine, basically, and then, you know, applying aging makeup only to bring him back for the prequels as a sort of middle-aged guy, which it's just bizarre but brilliant. And, like, I think at the time, again, the casting, just to keep going on about this, it's very unusual because Maggie Smith then, no kid would know who she was. You know, she'd won a couple of Oscars for films that no one will ever see and no one ever mentions these days. One, Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, you should check that one out as a teacher. Very, very good. She is brilliant. I mean, she's a brilliant actress. And it sort of almost took Downton Abbey for people, you know, in her 80s maybe, for people to actually realise how good she was. And she's ridiculously good in that. Absolutely fantastic. And in this, even she's magical. She's part of that thing in London where you can see the sense of someone old who's still got an amazing spirit and who has that sort of innocence within them and who's trying to encourage it. And I think, you know, Peter, you've become a pirate. That's another the score then as well, because that's, you know, not so much an emotional bit, but it's like, oh my word, heck, what's going on? And yeah, she's really the beating heart of the film, you could say, in many ways. She's the mainstay. She's who we look up to the most and who we try to get back to. And it's great when everyone comes back at the end. And the ending, my word. But anyway.
No, absolutely. One thing we're not spoke about the Lost Boys. And I know we're a bit pushed for time, so we will get this sorted. I've never been keen on them. I'm not going to lie for you guys. I really like one of them, and I always have done. Thudbutt. I think we spoke before. Just the way he eats that cake without it being there, I think is unbelievable, and I always loved him in it. But I was never a big fan of Rufio. So if anyone wants to quickly speak about the Lost Boys,
I think John does. I think John
does. He's fuming, but I'm going to just politely hand over because to me this film was always about Dustin Hoffman, Captain Hook, and Robin Williams. So yeah, I'm not going to Lost Boys. John.
I mean, what do you want? You know what I mean?
They're just a bit annoying. I just think, as a kid, I'd have just been wound up if I was in their company.
Yeah, well, I probably agree with that. But Peter Pan's an annoying little brat if you ever watch the Disney film. I mean, at the end of the day, these are kids who haven't got parents, who live on their own, who basically don't ever grow up, and they just spend the day antagonizing pirates. They're hardly the high class society, are they? Really? But I love them. I think they bring the emotional edge. I think I love the contrast of ages. I love the little kid who pulls Peter's face and goes, "There you are, Peter." I love him, and unbelievable scenes, and they're involved in the greatest food fight in cinema history. What more do you want, really? Don't ask. Oh, it's just. I don't even feel I need to defend it. I just feel like, I love Cinema Savvy, but due respect, you've just got this one wrong. Sorry, carry on, lads.
No, I've enjoyed the Lost Boys in the film. I think they just show the sense of wonderment and just fun that Peter would have had when he was there. For me, it makes me ask questions, because I'm like, in the original, in all the stories, there's only very few Lost Boys, but then here there's like a whole massive group of them, so at varying different ages. So it makes you think, oh, have more come ever since? Have more joined? Was Rufio part of that original, or did he come after Peter left and take up? There's so many like ideas that could be explored there. But I think the core group of Lost Boys that we get to see is great. I mean, I always looking at the guy Jason Fisher who played Ace, who was in The Witches. It always made me go, "Oh my god, it's him from The Witches," because he was such a lead role in that, and then he doesn't really do much here. But I was always just thought, "Oh, that's funny." And then the other guy, Don't Ask, because I always just loved his jacket. I think some of the costuming for these are great, and it's like all tailored to maybe what their personality or backgrounds are. And then Rufio, as a kid, I never liked him, because I was always like, "Oh, you're just bad, and you're the one who's stopping Peter from doing this." But then as I've gotten older, I'm like, okay, he's cool. He's really cool. Like, he's kind of badass. I love his hair. Like, I just think he's great. And then I don't tear up when he dies, but I do feel very sad when he does. I'm just kind of like, oh, like, it's quite horrible to do as well. Like, of all the people to be affected by this film, it's really Captain Hook and Rufio, and it's like, okay, those two, maybe not Rufio, but yeah, just I think they're a great addition. I kind of wish there was a bit more about them, but I think in what they do, they show the fun, they show Peter what to do, and I love the scenes where they're at that massive tree and they have all those little hut bed things. So,
well, first of all, I think Rufio growing up was the coolest kid that was ever created in the world. He was probably like a little bit older than us, so it was like someone to look up to and think, "Wow, I'd love to hang around and play with him, and be friends with him." And yeah, they're brilliant, the Lost Boys, because essentially this is what the film's all about, and it needs a good gang of them, and it needs Robin Williams, who's so good with acting alongside children. Again, I'll mention Jack in that the whole film he's acting with 10-year-olds, and you believe that they're all good mates at school. In this, you believe that they're good mates, and they went right. I'm going to do it. I'm going to mention that blessed film again. So, in the same way that they try and get Peter to remember who he is and believe who he is, that's the really harrowing bit for me. And when at first he doesn't remember and they can't get him. Yeah, I'm going to mention it. Superman 3. Yeah, not joking. Because in that, of course, Superman becomes evil, basically, and he loses all sense of identity. And you see, I think it's Lana Lang's son trying to plead with him, like crying, "Superman, please, it's Superman." And all this, it's just, I could cry thinking about that. Like, he just dismisses him and everything. And it's, I only just thought about that then. I know I'm obsessed, but both of them are so like, I can't stand the thought of children pleading with the adults to sort of remember who they are and just don't grow up and remember who you really are. And I think the brilliance of that. And yeah, for Rufio to die in a U, good grief.
It's an okay moment. I'm not gonna. I don't. I just think I think the age I am, you mentioned about growing up. I had Star Wars to grow up with, didn't I? So I'm just gonna say,
Oh well, well, not Star Wars.
Qui-Gon.
Oh,
yeah,
God.
exactly. That was the one that got me, and he was sort of probably 10 times my age back then.
Yeah.
What I want to speak about quickly, every week we get the John Williams section, one of the best composers ever. I say it every week, so I tend to get quieter as every passing week. So really quickly over to you guys. I'm going to let you have this one. I think this is one of his, I can't say best scores because he is one of the best ever. So his scores are all at a pedigree above the rest. But you guys, we spoke about it a little bit earlier. Do you think this is one of his genuine best ones? I think this would be a top 15, top 20, and this guy's probably done about 100, 200 scores. So that's quite high for me.
It's top 5. I think it's absolutely outstanding. I think you can't really compare it to some of the franchise ones, like say Star Wars or Superman, because they're so synonymous with the franchise as such. This is a standalone film. It doesn't have a theme tune when it comes in terms of this is the intro to the film, but it captures every emotion at the right time. You watch scenes like the food fight on mute, and they have no impact compared to the score that's going on. Flight into Neverland is just 5 simple notes of do 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 do. Perfection, absolute perfection. And you've got the big. There's the scale of it. So you got like the war scenes. So the I can't remember the war, but do 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 do.
Yeah.
Absolutely sensational. Williams is just on fire at this point. I just love it. I just absolutely love it. And what about you?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is probably one of my favorite scores of all time. I think every track just works so well for me. Remembering childhood, that particular piece, like when Robin Williams died, I listened to that straight away.
Oh God!
I know. I'm gonna get you all crying, but you know what I mean. But it really hits. It hits such an emotional beat for me, and that whole scene, as you probably are aware at this point, is one of my absolute favorites from the film.
Yeah.
So it really the scripts, the performances, the sets, the music, everything comes together in that point. And again, yeah, you're right, John. Without that music, it would hit so much less. But yeah, that, and I think the closing music where Toodles flies off is just so. I absolutely just adore it. So I mean, again, it's just another John Williams masterpiece, and there's very few that aren't.
Sorry, Sam. I've got to mention as well the song.
Yes.
When You're Alone.
Leslie Brickus.
Nominated for an Oscar as well.
Yeah.
Oh my word.
Yeah.
And when Maggie's singing that on the side, and you get that bozo pirate with the ginger curly hair.
It's like,
oh my word. That straight to the heart, that bit. That is unbelievable. And there was a Christian song that was released a few years ago called You Never Give Up on Us. And everyone was like, what a lovely melody. And I was like, that is When You're Alone by like, Leslie Brickus needs to sue this guy right now.
Yeah, I think we mentioned it on one of our. Well, I did. I deliberately jammed it into one of our songbook episodes because of Leslie Brickus, and I basically just wanted people to listen to it because it's so good. But I'd forgotten about the song in the years that I hadn't seen it, because I think growing up, I assumed that this was one of the most famous theme tunes in ever. You know, the flights like that and E.T. I assume. I know they're quite similar in many ways, but I assume that those two were like everyone knew them. And then you grow up and you think, no, I don't think anyone does know this. I mean, when they hear it now, they probably will. They'll get recollections. But yeah, the score. I think that John Williams, he often. Some people might say he's quite. A lot of them sound similar, but they're all winning. They all work for the individual films, and I think. I mean, there's for me, Superman, AI, which hopefully I'll get to talk about, are just some of the most beautiful music ever. Superman, particularly because it's got about 10 different themes in the film. Everyone just thinks of the main theme, but there's so many more. But in this is one of the greatest soundtracks he's ever done, and it carries you through the whole film. It really does. And that song, oh gosh, I can't. Oh, I love singing it. Basically, I won't sing it now, but I love sort of just having that feeling of being there, being in a magical land, and yeah, it's perfect soundtrack.
Definitely. And one thing, as we always do in this series, we talk about when the film coming out. So we've got a tweet being sent into us I want to read out from Matt. It always amazes me to see how low this scored of critics. I was the right age when it came out. It's an iconic film. He tweeted the Rotten Tomatoes score of 29%. I think what I'll always say is we spoke about it earlier. It might have had a reception at the time. They thought Spielberg. They thought it'd be the original take. And as we said, I think this is a film that people will go back to, and it'd be very varying now compared to back then. So thanks, Matt, for sending that in. And just speaking about when it came out, it made fourth highest grossing film in 1991. $300 million it grossed off a $70 million budget. Still a massive. They say it was a financial failure to a point, but it was also released at the same time as Beauty and the Beast, which nobody thought would be as big as it ever was. So that's understandable. And still, box office isn't everything. When you're looking at a film 30 plus years later, there's so many gems that don't make the money, and there's so many terrible films that make 10 times as much. So that's that. Oscars, we just spoke about that song. That was one of its 5 nominations, didn't get a win, which is also understandable. And again, the Oscars aren't the be all and end all. But what I want to speak about, we spoke again at the start about the film when it was released, what they did, what made it edgier. Real quickly, because we're just rounding up now. Everybody, can they give me if they had to pick one favorite scene? If you just had one, I'm gonna go with Captain Hook and Smee when we first meet them both, and that includes the little red carpet thing.
I think I'll go for the food fight. The whole scene. So we're talking about from Rufio and Peter and the argument. Peter just starting to learn who he is, and then you're banning. And Rufio just shouting his own name is so typical of a spoiled little boy who thinks that everyone loves him, and all of a sudden then realized, oh no, he's not got it. And then the food fight, and then the moment where he throws the coconut and he picks up the sword. And that's the emotional hook that gets you. That's like, he realizes there's more to him. And Thudbutt looks up and just goes, "Bang, and it's just like, yes. That's got everything I want in a family film, that scene. It's unbelievable.
I have to just give a quick mention. I think that both the kids, Maggie and Jack, I think they did a really good job in the film. I know we didn't mention the characters, but I think, because I know as an honorable mention scene, like the scene between Hook and Jack in the Clock Museum, I think that's really great. And I think he does a really great job there. I think just a couple of other ones are just when Peter speaks with Thudbutt about Toodles and the marbles. I think that's lovely. Moira seeing the kids. But yeah, I really can't just pick one, but it would be the memory scene between Tinkerbell and Peter in the tree, that whole scene, and then just the ending, and then Toodles flying off, and then Peter saying to live would be an awfully big adventure. I think that's it. Just those two. I can't choose between them.
What a film.
Yeah. I don't know whether I can add any more. I mean, I do love I know it's dodgy, but when he goes into Wendy's bedroom and all that. And again, as a kid, not knowing about all this, that was quite a big moment for me, I remember. And the music for that is so magical. Obviously, when he finally flies, I know it's an obvious one to choose, but the way it's done and the music, and what You Are the Pan, when Rufio gives him the cutlass, and I mean that's just a joke, isn't it? That's actually reminds me another film that no one remembers. Loads of Oscar nominations for a non-drama film at the time, with Dustin Hoffman and the boy from Hook was the main boy in it. Won Oscar for Best Song, Madonna. No one, Dick Tracy. No one cares.
I've not seen it. Isn't that Thunderbird?
Brilliant. It's so good. Dustin Hoffman's an uncredited cameo as Mumbles, who that's all he does. Like, he just speaks like that. Please see that film. It's very much like the noir Batman, the animated series type stuff. But yeah, I'd probably choose the You Are the Pan that moment, and you just get the chills, don't you? Absolutely love it.
It's Peter Pan's back, and that's what works with it. It's the build up to the film where when you get to him returning, they've not like just rushed him and said, "You're Peter Pan again, quickly go." It's the whole concept of the film is reaching that moment, and if we're sort of heading into our final thoughts with that, I'm going to try and keep mine light. But I absolutely love this film. I loved it as a kid. I enjoyed it as an adult, and you know what? Not that I didn't respect it as a kid, but as an adult, you find this immaculate respect for it. That actually what they tried to do with the story is so much more daring than it's actually going to get any credit for down the line. And I absolutely love this. And I think this will be one where, I've not got kids to show it to, but I imagine like generationally, this will be shown down the line for generations to come when kids are learning about Robin Williams or maybe about Spielberg, that these are the kind of films they'll grow up with. And, when Disney inevitably do a Peter Pan film, it won't stand up to this. You will just know immediately it won't work. It won't have the heart. It will be a corporate machines just adding to its remake list, and absolutely love this. And the John Williams score is like the icing on the cake to the film. And yeah, I've got a lot of time for it. I'm quite excited to see it again. I'm trying to avoid seeing Spielberg films again across the next 9 months. So when it gets to December onwards, I can try and pick out a few good ones again. But I think this will be one I'm really excited to see again down the line.
Yeah, for me, it's number 10 on my Spielberg film list, and that says it all when you've got Jurassic Park, all the 3 Indiana Jones films just the top of your head, and then you've got Saving Private Ryan, Schindler's List, Catch Me If You Can. You've got so many amazing films. Jaws. For it to be number 10 out of the 30 plus films he's done is testament to how amazing this film is. And I love it. It has a special place in my heart. I showed my son, and he loved lots of it as well. I do think it's one of those films that you're going to love more if you were brought up on it. I do think that, but I'm all right with that because I was brought up on it, so I'm allowed to say how great it is. I adore it. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's probably one of my favorite films of all. I think it doesn't get into my top 10, but I think it would be maybe my top 20 films potentially of all time. There's so much to love about it. I think nostalgia does play a heavy part, of course. But I mean, like watching it last night, so many times in a film that I watch, I will grab my phone and just be on it whilst I'm watching. But I didn't do that at all last night. Which really you would do more with a film that you've seen so many times, but because it has been quite a few years now since I've watched it all the way through, and it was just nice to see it. And I just think it's a unique film. It's so different from things that were coming out at the time, and I think it's different from what's happening now. They really took a chance on a different angle and that specific type of those specific types of themes and those actors. You would never get all of those actors playing those types of roles. It's just such a great film, and I'm glad that we've managed to speak about it. And that's still 31 years later. A lot of us still have such great thoughts and feelings about it. And I wish I could scream like Liza to end it on, but I can't, and I won't put you through me even trying to do that anyway. So
I'm just so happy that George and Sam at your age really appreciate this film, because I was worried going. Obviously, I knew Sam loved it, but I was worried. I didn't expect you to like it as much as you did, George. And I know you. Obviously, you're a big Spielberg fan, and you can really sort of respect the filmmaking. That's the level that we're on here. But to go in sort of fair, if someone watched this who was in the 20s now, I've no idea whether they would like it, because it's a brave film. No one would take on a film like this these days. It has to be. If you're doing, like we say, one of these sort of treasured books or IPs, as they would say now, you do it so much safer. You'd have loads more jokiness, and you wouldn't have the drama and the tension and the dark side to it. It's so much more difficult to make a film. I mean, I'm not a filmmaker, I'm not saying that, but I'd imagine it's far more difficult to make a film like this probably than Spielberg did for a lot of the more serious stuff that he did, because those, where you're going, you know what the tone is, the source material. This is a completely original take on it. You're taking a risk, and you've got to back the actors that you've assembled. And really, it's all down to Spielberg, like I said at the beginning, how he somehow manages to get all this together and present us with one of the most entertaining, one of the most magical films that's ever been made. For me, it is up there with E.T. It is and it's one of those films that I will always, I'd love kids to watch and enjoy, and I just hope that continues now throughout the years.
No, definitely. It's really well said, put better eloquently but than I could say with that. And I think what I'll just kind of close with that, I don't think even Spielberg would be allowed to make this film today. I don't think the studios would back it at all. Doesn't matter who it is. And that's the real sad thing. Unless Netflix, we're going to keep getting to billions more debt and give it something like 500 mil. That is going to round out our review for Hook. Thank you all for coming on for so long with this today. And for everybody at home, please comment your thoughts on the film. If you enjoyed it, if you grew up with it, if maybe you've had a change, you didn't like it before, you like it now, please do let us know. We're really excited to hear about you from that. And I guess we can say coming up next week, we have Jurassic Park. That is going to be one of the biggest ones on the channel. I'm already trying to figure out a running length today. It's been a fantastic test with 4 people, so I'm not sure how we're going to accommodate 5. Those 5 will be TBC. I'll have more details nearer the time because we haven't got it sorted at the time of recording. But alongside that, coming up on the series, we've got Jurassic Park, as I said, on the 5th of July. Schindler's List on the 12th. The Lost World, the 19th, Amistad on the 26th, and what I'm really going to tease is on the, I think, 2nd of August is Saving Private Ryan, which is, to me, one of the greatest pieces of film ever put together by an individual. But yes, this has been delightful. And I'm just going to quickly have the social medias rolling below for you guys as well. So, Tom, Really 007. If people aren't following you, which they should, but I've jumped on a lot of our videos over the years. You had the Batman stuff at the start of the year as well, which I know John was on. What can people expect from Really 007? It's a really dumb question, but I've got to ask it.
Yeah. Well, at the moment, we're actually doing a slightly pioneering thing because all the Bonds are on at the cinema nationwide in the UK. So they started, when was it? The end of March, I think, and they're going right through to the start of October with No Time to Die. So it was quite a big challenge. I didn't really expect that it would take off because it's quite a commitment to go and watch every one. But we so far, at least some of us have seen them all, and we're doing a series of anyone who watches them can send us their audio thoughts, a bit like the view from the lobby, before and after if they want. And it's a good chance for people who perhaps haven't been on a podcast before. They're afraid of sort of just coming on as a guest because it must be quite daunting to do that because not everyone's as cocky as me and as some of the other people on there. So it's a great chance. So please, if you email us anything that you've seen, and we've had quite a few new contributors to that, and it's been brilliant. So that'll be our main thing now until October. But we're trying to coincide the odd guest from the films that we've managed to get and things like that on the way. And I know next week Sam is on one of those interviews, which hopefully you'll all enjoy.
Definitely, everybody, please check them out. It's always a delight to get you on, and we'll have you on for a few more of these. I know we've got some plans in place for some more of these Spielberg stuff. So, thank you, Long, for coming on. And people at home, you want to find out about what's happening with us, what's happening on the channel. I think by the time this video goes up, an Elvis review would have been out the weekend before. We're heading into summer blockbuster mode. A lot of things coming out. So that's Instagram and Twitter at cinema_savvy, Facebook and letterboxd.com/cinemasavvy. A link to Redbubble in that description below. And as I said, next week's Jurassic Park, that needs no explanation in marketing itself. So thank you all for coming on, for you three to take time out of your day to join me today. It's been magnificent. And to everybody at home, take care, and we'll see you on the next one.